Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above, from the mountains to the prairies to the oceans wide with God bless America, my home, sweet home. Please join us singing with me. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above.
Again, thanks for coming out today. I'm just going to say a few words and then we'll send everybody back to class. Would you guys like me to stretch this out or get you back to class as soon as possible? Okay, we'll try. In a speech given to Congress right after the Pearl Harbor attacks, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, our president at the time, gave a speech that said, on December 7th, 1941, a date that will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by the naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. 60 years later, on September 20th, 2001, George Bush, President of the United States at the time, gave a similar speech. He said, after the 9/11 attacks, we are a country awakened to danger and called to defend freedom. Today we gather to remember December 7th, 1941, when nearly 2,500 lives were lost, and up until 9/11 was the deadliest attack on American soil. Though most of those that were killed at Pearl Harbor were military personnel, we must remember the United States was at peace that day when the attack was waged. No declaration of war had been made by either side, though it was in the works by the Empire of Japan, we found, and it was in the works by their Axis collaborators. The Empire of Italy at the time had an emperor, and Nazi Germany. Pearl Harbor was truly a day that will live in infamy. It was a day that now, as a nation, when we're engaged in a war in the Gulf and around the world, we must remember that war can be brought to us at any time, and peace can be disrupted, and lives can be lost. Due to this, we must always be ready and prepared for the darkest events. We must remember that those of us here at home must always support those who remain ready to defend us at all times. Here's a series of events on December 7th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, 1941. On December 6th, in Washington, D.C., Franklin Roosevelt made a final appeal to the Emperor of Japan for peace. This, of course, was ignored, and at that time, the Japanese Empire was preparing an attack, and their ships were already on the way to Pearl Harbor. On December 7th, the Japanese attack force under the command of Admiral Nagumo consisted of 6 carriers, 423 planes. They were about to attack. At 6 a.m., the first wave of attack planes of 183 Japanese planes took off, and at that point they were 230 miles northwest of Oahu, and our Pacific Fleet at the time was in Pearl Harbor. At 7:15, a second attack was launched by the Japanese carriers off of Pearl Harbor. These attacks were devastating. Our troops, many of them were either on Sunday break, okay, or they were sleeping in the ships. On the Arizona alone, 1,700 men were killed and are still entombed in the Arizona. If you go to Pearl Harbor, you can still see that there's still oil leaking out of the ship. and it's considered a grave of U.S. military men. Matter of fact, survivors of the Arizona now, when they pass away for their whole lives, they felt guilty about surviving the attack. They're asked to be entombed in the Arizona. So it shows you the impact that it had on people's lives well after the attack. At 7:53 a.m., the assault wave of 51 Val dive bombers, 40 K torpedo bombers, 50 high-level bombers, and 43 Zero fighters commenced, and the code word was Tora, that basically said they had caught us by surprise. And again, it's no surprise that they caught us by surprise because we were not at war at that time. The air raid lasted until 9:45 a.m. 8 battleships were damaged, 5 were sunk, 3 light cruisers, 3 destroyers, and 3 smaller vessels were lost, as well as 188 aircraft. There were some acts of bravery that day. A cook on, I believe, the Utah, or it might have been the Arizona, was able to, he's not trained to be a machine gunner. African Americans at that time were consigned to duties that were not combat duties. He was a cook, but he got on deck and he used machine guns, shot down several planes, and was given the Congressional Medal of Honor, the first African American to receive that. Again, there were some 2 pilots that were able to take off from another airfield and shoot down several airplanes, but they were outnumbered and soon shot down themselves. So there were Americans fighting back that day. And what it did was the same thing it did at 9/11. It brought us together as a nation. At that time, many Americans wanted to stay out of World War II that was already waging in Europe. Many people didn't feel that we had to defend freedom around the world, that we should just mind our own business. What Pearl Harbor did is let us know that the United States should be the champion of freedom and fight for other people that are losing their lives and losing their freedom. That's why we are involved all around the world defending freedom. If you don't defend freedom around the world, yours is jeopardized. The casualty list of Pearl Harbor: 2,335 servicemen were killed, 68 civilians, over 1,000 wounded, and on the battleship Arizona alone, over 1,000 men were killed and entombed in the Arizona. The bomb that hit the Arizona was almost a 2,000-pound bomb. On December 8th, 1941, the United States and Britain declared war on Japan. And again, that's the day that President Roosevelt called it the Day of Infamy. Finally, on December 11th, Germany and Italy, the allies of the Emperor of Japan, declared war on the United States, and World War II began. So that's 70 years ago. It was a day very similar to today. Okay, sunny, quiet, and all of a sudden you're being bombed. So keep that in mind. It can happen at any time, and there's a reason to be prepared, and there's a reason for us to support other democracies around the world to make sure they can stay free as well. And now I'd like to have Major Weaver from the ROTC say a few words.
This is quite a kind of somber occasion for me. I lived in Hawaii for 4 years, and I went to the Arizona many times, and I know the sacrifices that the men and women made during World War II, and I think it's important that we continue to remember that legacy. As Mr. Rieger mentioned, even after 9/11, we realize that our freedom comes at a cost, and it requires a lot of sacrifice on the part of men and women representing the United States and other allies around the world. So we need to be mindful of that, and don't take freedom for granted. You have a blessing living here in Oxnard, going to this wonderful high school, wonderful teachers, so take advantage of it, do your best, and consider military as a career. Doesn't mean everyone has to serve in the military, but you all serve in different ways. Through the jobs you do, the work you do, and the sacrifices that each of you make, and each of your mothers and fathers and your family members make. So keep up the good work, keep working hard, and remember the sacrifices of the men and women in the U.S. military that have come before you. Thank you very much.
So again, I'd like to thank the band. I'd like to thank our ROTC, your teachers for coming out. Students, I'm sorry we couldn't stretch this out any longer. But I do want everyone, as they leave this ceremony today, be mindful of what has happened before, be mindful of what can happen in the future, and have compassion and respect for the people who have served and who are serving, people that are police officers, people that are firemen, and people that keep us safe every day. keep in mind that you're able to enjoy the fruits of freedom because of their efforts. Again, thank you for coming out today, and have a good day. Thank you.